What is real wealth? Most people think it's money and planes and cars and houses and all that material stuff. I can tell you that after having all of those things, that couldn't be the farthest from the truth. You got to focus on what leads to success. And everybody has a different definition of success. You got emotional, you got social, you got financial, you got occupational. You got spiritual, you got relationship success. Those are all the types and different kinds of success. And depending on who you are, you value some more than others. So while everybody looks on the internet at people that they think are successful, flying around in these big jets and driving around these fancy cars, it cannot be further from the truth. And just to put another burden on top of all this, you have your parents saying job security is success, or financial security is success, or a girl saying happiness or enlightenment is success, or you have an influencer, of course, which typically focuses on money and cars and jets and houses and all that stuff. That's all crap. I'm going to give you 4 things that I've personally done to help shape what I believe is true success. Number 1. Most people look outside for answers when the real truth is on the inside. Nobody wants to do this, but turn the mirror around and save yourself the hand you have been dealt. Is the hand that you have. So if you are a card player, whatever that hand is in front of you, that's your hand. And what could that be? That might be where you grew up. That might be the financial situation you are in. That might be the relationship you are in. That might be the health you have. Whatever that is, that's your hand. This concept is even biblical, where it says in Romans 2:2, "Do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Carl Jung said it also, looking inward awakens the true selves and desires. So the very first thing is to look inward instead of outward. This is rule number 1. So for me personally, my childhood shaped who I was. It shaped how I thought about health, how I thought about money, how I thought about family and relationships, friends, work, all of those things. And you are no different. Whatever software you have going on in your mind, it's from you. It's your biases on how you see the world. So you just got to accept that that is the hand that you are dealt. My software of my life is what's playing for me at all times. It's how I view things. And the key to that is rule number 2, self-awareness and self-examination. Once you start to look inward and you see the cards that you've been dealt, the next step, rule number 2, is to be self-aware and self-examine on where you are at. For example, if you are broke, more than likely the reason, even though you're going to argue with me, is because of the way you think about money or you think about yourself. So for me, one of the software pieces of my mind were my parents saying, we can't afford that. There's no way that we're going to be able to buy that. How are we going to do that? For me to unwind that software, to unlearn and then relearn, the first thing it took was my self-awareness that I was actually in that feedback loop, and then figure out how to change that from how I cannot afford that to how I can afford that. So one of the greatest books that helped me become more aware was the book on awareness by Anthony Dello. I cannot recommend this enough. I actually have that book still. I highlight it, I read it whenever I have a moment. I pull it out and I read a sentence, a paragraph, a page, or even a chapter. But it's always close by because it's a continual reminder of how I need to unwire my own brain and change my software so that I can start to think differently. But the only way I know even where to go is if I have a self-awareness of myself and I'm looking at my hand I was dealt. So a very good way to do this is just take a look at the continual habits that you have. So let's say you have a really bad habit around health. There's another great book called The Habit Loop, which teaches you there's a cue, there's a routine, and then there's a reward to every single thing you are doing, every single thought you are having, and the way that you are actually doing things each and every day. That might be drinking, might be smoking a cigarette, it might be eating too much, it might be watching a lot of TV. It might be all kinds of things that are not moving you forward, but all these things have some type of reward. Those are all habits that you've developed that are part of who you are. They are part of the hand you've been dealt. The only way to look at that feedback loop is to first identify your thoughts through self-awareness, then take a look at your feelings behind that. For a lot of you, like me, sometimes you just stuff those habits. Then from there, you dig hard into your behaviors and actions, which of course become your habits. That is the feedback loop for you and me and everyone else. And those are all inside. They are not outside. You just try to use excuses on the outside to justify where you are on the inside. So when you change your thoughts, you change your life, you change your direction on things that you want. For example, if you want a really good relationship with your significant other and you are using old patterns or things that you learned that you are now just doing either conditionally or unconditionally, that might be sabotaging all the relationships going forward. That could be with your health, that could be with the money, and that certainly could be with your friends and family. You are in control of how you respond to everything and how you see everything. I am no different than anyone. I had to do hard work on myself to be able to get to this situation now. As a result of making all those changes over all those years, slowly, methodically, and over time, now I see the world very differently. Now I see the kid I used to be. I'm now the observer of that kid, of that person that I used to be. And I can see it so clearly now as a result of all the work that I did to get to this point. And I still have a long way to go. So rule number 2 is to be really self-aware and self-examining on where exactly you are right now. This is the hardest part, because until you acknowledge and are fully transparent with other people about the situation you are in, you will never fix it. You have to be brutally honest about your own thoughts as it relates to family, money, health, church, alcohol, whatever it might be. You have to be brutally honest on all those things in order for them to get better. And by focusing on your own actions and your responses, you are now in control. And before you are completely out of control, completely subjected to the unconscious mind or conscious mind of the things that you are doing without even thinking about it. So if you want to be in control, you first have to be aware of what you are actually doing from moment to moment. That's the only way you can identify the bad behavior and then fix it. So rule number 3 is self-control. This for me was the hardest. This is mastering your impulses and your emotions. So this is when somebody says something to you and you react. This is instead of listening to learn, you are actually listening to talk, to respond. This does not mean suppressing your emotions, but understanding how to identify them so that you can choose how to respond. I heard it best when people put it into 2 categories. They said, are they facts or are they judgments? Which are they? Because most people have opinions and judgments, but they don't actually pay attention to the facts. What are the words that they are using? Are you using words like, I wish, I hope, I can, or I'll try? If you are, then those are self-defeating words. Those words are non-committal. If you're like everyone, you've got fear of failure. I don't feel like I'm enough. And all of those things are oftentimes deep rooted, just like they are in me and sometimes in many of you. Now, these things that I just said, they might not be so natural, but until you're able to tackle these, they're going to continue and hinder your path to success. You cannot be enslaved by these thoughts. So you can imagine growing up with not a lot of money. You can imagine myself not growing up with a lot, having to go to thrift stores for clothes. Now, how do you break out of that? To be able to feel like you can afford things, because that's how I was raised. That's my programming, my software. I need to unlearn this. The first thing is just to acknowledge it and make yourself aware of it. That's number one. And then take a look at that and say, is this me? Does this have to be me? This takes some deep-seated work. How do you move something like that from the unconscious to the conscious? That's the game. And that's rule number 3 for self-control. So in order, so far, we got the first is know that it's inside and not outside. The second is self-awareness. The third is self-control. And the fourth and final rule is what I call self-reflection and continuous improvement. This is where a lot of people stop. So even myself, I believe that after I went to college, I wasn't going to read anymore. So for years, I was so tired of all those darn textbooks. I stopped reading, and that's when I actually stopped learning. Back then, we didn't have YouTube. We didn't have all these extra things like today. So I just stopped reading for several years, and I realized that the world was just flying by because things continued. Once I started reading, once I started pouring myself back into personal development, going to seminars, reading lots of books, and now of course I devour YouTube videos on various subjects like probably a lot of you. I'm now very reflective continually on the things that I might improve from day to day. The only way to move the needle is to be self-reflective every day. Have something every day that you are trying to improve continuously. It doesn't matter what it is. Maybe it's a relationship with your significant other, or maybe a family member, or maybe a kid of yours, or maybe it's with your health, or maybe it's financial, or maybe it's just trying to be a little bit better at work with your coworker, or with how you're being viewed in your job itself. It's these simple things that you're trying to improve on each and every day. It doesn't really matter, but there always has to be a little bit of self-reflection and some continual improvement. My experience is a lot of people just shut down. They're afraid to make any changes. They're afraid they might get exposed somehow as some kind of failure. The reality is everyone's going through their own stuff. And the minute you become a little more vulnerable to other people, you'd be surprised how much they actually open up. So each and every day, you should get up with one thing in mind. What can I do today to make me a little bit better tomorrow? It doesn't have to be monumental. It honestly just has to be this big. And reflect on the things that you have in your control, which is you, and move them closer towards your target. You have to have a mindset of continuous growth. You have to have actionable steps, personal, professional, and social. You have to figure out what those are for you. But the reality is, you don't know what they are until you actually look inside to see, what do I have to improve? Until you actually reach inside and see what it is that I actually have to improve, once you have that inventory, then you're able to draft a new hand of cards that is going to be very different than anybody else's. Then you just set yourself on a journey toward continual lifelong improvement. The work never stops. So when I was a young man, success to me was literally moving out of my parents' house. I say young man like I'm like, but anyways, and getting a job. Then of course it moved to some type of investing. That was success to me, which at the time happened to be stocks, and then from there it moved into real estate investing. And then I started a company, and then I started a real estate investment company. And then success to me became about financial freedom. How can I preserve my time? How can I get my time through having financial freedom? And now, of course, it's education-based to help people from my lessons. So it doesn't matter where you are in your success journey. It just matters that you are trying to move the needle a little bit each and every day. Don't forget to check out this video right here. And until next time, peace.